Introduce Craig Smith, who's going to talk to us not about Smith on fear, but Smith on fashion, which I think will be just fabulous. So welcome from a long ways away, as many of you are, of course, welcome to the Summer Institute. Craig.
Thanks. Right, I'm going to put this down here. Hopefully it won't deafen anyone or explode or something. Maybe I should have put it down there.
Just turn it down. So.
Turn it down? Oh, okay.
Maybe you could come and help.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see the volume?
Oh, it's not that. No, that's mute.
Yeah, so using that. I don't know where that is.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that's it. Right. So Smith on fashion. Maybe I should just say before I start what got me interested in this, and what got me interested in it is not necessarily what Smith has to say in particular about fashion itself. It's the fact that he feels the need to have a specific chapter in the theory of moral sentiments that deals explicitly with fashion and custom and the relationship between fashion, custom and moral sentiments. And why I'm interested in that particular section of it is that it strikes me as being one of the less satisfactory sections of the theory of moral sentiments. Smith was a very careful writer, and some of the things in that section are hedged or qualified or left hanging, shall we say. And one of the reasons that this is often taken to be the case, people who looked at TMS, is that he's thought to be dealing with a very specific problem or danger of this theory. That is that the theory of moral sentiments provides a naturalised account of the rise of conscience and morality in a given society. And the danger that this leaves open is a form of what today we would call cultural relativism. In other words, there is no external perspective to give a critique of the moral system that arises in any given society. And this can leave Smith in a rather dangerous position, because it means that there are a whole lot of things that he would want to criticise that within the terms of his own system he's unable to do because he has got the external perspective. And one of the ways he tries to deal with that is in the discussion in the chapter on fashion and custom. And another way he tries to deal with it is, of course, famously in the Impartial Spectator. The other problem that arises when Smith talks about fashion is the worry that fashion in society acts or has a very big influence on individual behaviour to the extent that it can actually pervert the moral sentiments and that it can drive us away from virtue to pursue more superficial interests and forms of behaviour. And that's why the paper starts, as many of my papers do, with a quote from Morrissey. But still, I'd rather be famous than righteous or holy. So that's the problem. Okay, so what I want to do is to say a little bit about what Smith has to say about fashion and about a particular character within what he says about fashion, the man of fashion or the dandy. And then use that analysis of fashion and of the man of fashion to look at his wider explanation of social change and then see how that connects to this problem, this difficulty about cultural relativism. So where does fashion fit in for Smith? Fashion is a natural feature of societies. All human societies have something approaching or akin to fashion. And it arises from the same sources as the theory of the generation of morality for Smith. So it arises from natural sociability. We find ourselves in a social setting and we become aware that other people are reacting to us, and we adjust our behaviour in accordance with that. Now obviously, in the moral sentiments, that's we adjust our actions and our activities in line with what's approved or disapproved of by others, seeking their approbation. I noticed quite early on in what you might call Smith's studies, Smith's pupil Dugald Stewart says that Smith was always disposed to ascribe to custom and fashion their full share in regulating the opinions of mankind with respect to beauty. Indeed, this is a collateral inquiry within the theory of moral sentiments, so it's been noticed right from the start that this paralleling of the generation of fashion, irrational morality is going on in Smith's work. Okay, so we're sociable creatures. We want to be that which is approved of and admired by others. And so we alter our appearance, or we choose our clothing in such a way that it conforms to what we believe other people are going to approve of or like. What Smith then does is, sorry, I should say that this is not unique to Smith. This analysis of fashion also appears in Hume's work in the treatise. Hume has a chapter on fame, and in that chapter he deploys a very similar set of analyses to explain the phenomenon of fashion in society. And his particular interest, Hume's particular interest, is in the eminent people within a society and how people want to be eminent so that people look upon them and approve of them. So that people want to be famous. They want to be approved of by others. Smith takes this idea on and combines it with influences that I'm not going to talk about from Rousseau and the Discourse on the Origins of Inequality. What Smith does with this line of argument that he gets from Hume and from Rousseau is he attaches it to his analysis of rank or social class in society. So the explanation of who is being emulated is attached to a theory of social class. So it's the rich that are emulated. The people who set the fashion are the wealthy in a society. And this, for Smith, forms part of the explanation of why people pursue wealth, people pursue riches. They don't pursue wealth and riches because of the utility that it provides for them. They pursue wealth and riches because it makes them the people that are observed and looked upon kindly by others in society. So, for example, we have in the Wealth of Nations. With the greater part of rich people, the chief enjoyment of riches consists in the parade of riches, which in their eyes is never so complete as when they appear to possess those decisive marks of opulence which nobody can possess for themselves. In their eyes, the merit of an object, which is in any degree either useful or beautiful, is greatly enhanced by its scarcity, or by the great labour which it requires to collect any considerable quantity of it, a labour which nobody can afford to pay for themselves. So the pursuit of wealth is largely attached to the same kind of psychological explanation, social psychological explanation that he has for fashion. People pursue wealth because they think they want to display that wealth, and in displaying that wealth, they want to be in the attention of other people in society, and they want the approbation of other people. Okay, so what do we get from that? Well, an interesting subset of the arguments in Wealth of Nations then is the distinction between goods that are valued for ornament and goods that are valued for use. So that's one way it affects his thought. He thinks that these are subject to different consumption patterns. Indeed, consumption patterns can be very radically different over time. So that's one interesting way in which fashion impinges onto the economics, which I'll return to. But the idea to just focus on here for a moment is this idea that people are driven to pursue, or driven to engage in, I don't want to say fashionable behaviour, but pursuing fashion, or engaging in seeking after objects or goods that will bring them the approbation of their peers. Okay, so why is this again? Well, in TNS we get a whole range of different explanations advanced for this, but the main one is this core point that we want to be observed, attended to, taken account of, and so we engage in activities that we believe will bring others' attention and approbation upon us. What makes an object a good, useful in this end is that it attracts people's attention. Okay. So, what does this mean in terms of the theory of rank or of social class that Smith provides for us? Well, what it means is that the wealthy are engaged in the pursuit or the acquisition of what he calls trinkets of frivolous utility, things that people will look upon and think are tremendous, but which need not have any particular real use for them. The people who are, if you like, the leaders of fashion, who set the fashion, according to Smith, are the people who are the most eminent in a society. The people who are most eminent in a society are those who are most powerful, most wealthy, and have greatest access to these goods that other people can then look at and see. I think that's something that I would like to have. So he says, the man of rank and distinction is observed by all the world. Everybody is eager to look at him and to conceive, at least by sympathy, that joy and exultation circumstances naturally inspire him. His actions are the objects of public care. Scarce a word, scarce a gesture can fall from him that is altogether neglected. So the people who lead the fashion are the celebrities in a society. Okay. So again, Smith and TMS says, the rich man glories in his riches because he feels that they naturally draw upon him the attention of the world, and that mankind are disposed to go along with him in all the agreeable emotions which the advantages of his situation so readily inspire in him. So the rich man feels this approbation that comes from others and attaches that approbation to the display of wealth or the display of external advantages that others find attractive. Okay, so this then becomes a prompt or a motivator to the activity of a certain class or group of rank of people in society. They are motivated by this desire to continue in their role as somebody who is looked upon favourably by others. They want to be famous. And the danger of this, obviously, for Smith is that some people might be led by this kind of phenomenon that he's describing to prefer being famous to being virtuous. And that might be very dangerous for society in general. Why might it be very dangerous? Well, it might mean that a great deal of human activity is diverted from virtuous behaviour into the pursuit of this kind of acquisition for fashionable purposes. And that it might actually lead to, as he says in TRS, the corruption, indeed he calls it the most universal corruption, or the most universal cause of corruption of moral sentiments. Okay, so there's a worry then. He's accepting that fashion is real and that it comes from the same sources as his explanation of the generation of morality. And there's a worry that it is potentially in competition with virtuous behaviour or with the forces that drive virtuous behaviour in society. It's also attached to his theory of the origin, or is in the name of John Miller's book, The Origin of the Dissection of Ranks in Society. So what I want to talk about now is a particular character that appears in a number of points in Smith's work that he uses to illustrate this. And this is the man of fashion, or the dandy. And the man of fashion is quite an interesting character because he crops up in a number of places. And he's almost always regarded as a sort of figure of fun or disdain by Smith. Smith kind of laughingly jokes about these people. You know, look at this person buying all these ridiculous things in order to, you know, make himself, or get himself the attention of other people. Look at how vain and superficial this person is. What they're doing is not really related to virtue or anything of real worth in human life. But nonetheless, what he has to say about how the man of fashion operates, I think, is quite interesting. Okay, so again, the man of fashion leads fashion. The man of fashion is, and I'll quote this here from TMS, it is from our disposition to admire and consequently to imitate the rich and the great that they are enabled to set or lead what is called the fashion. So the man of fashion is that person who sets or leads the fashion, the person who's looked at and followed and observed. But the difficulty for Smith is that the man of fashion is a particular subset of the wealthy. It's not the wealthy, it's not all of the wealthy who are men of fashion. It's within the group of the wealthy or the famous or the eminent, there are a group of people in competition to lead or set the fashion. So it's not always the same person that's looked upon as setting the fashion. There's a change internally. So it's not just wealth that we're looking at here. We're actually looking at a kind of analysis of the psychology of relationships of individuals within a particular rank. So within the wealthy, the man of fashion or the dandy is a particular subset who helps to lead the fashion amongst the wealthy, which then percolates outwards to the rest of society. So what does the man of fashion do? The man of fashion is interested in clothes, he's interested in parties, he's interested in music, he's interested in looking like he is the man, basically, to use the phrase. Okay, so this is what the man of fashion is about. That's his life. That's what he cultivates, that's what he looks towards, that's how he assesses himself. So the great fear for the man of fashion, of course, is to cease to be the leader of fashion, to go out of fashion. So how does the man of fashion go about being fashionable? Well, he goes to a lot of parties, apparently. And he stands about and is admired. But what is he admired for? Well, he's admired, of course, for his behaviour, his immaculate manners, but he's also admired for his clothing, for his appearance, and for his tastes in music and art. He's admired for his home, which is immaculately furnished with the most spectacular goods that can be bought in the marketplace. Okay. So what we then get from Smith is actually an analysis of how fashion applies to particular items that the man of fashion might deploy. Okay, so this starts by noting that the fashion in clothing operates on quite a quick cycle. So he says a well-turned coat is done in a 12-month. Fashion clothing can pass in a year. Fashion furniture, according to Smith, lasts longer, over a 5 or 6 year period. Fashions in buildings last longer than that again, up to 100 years, according to Smith. Now what's interesting there, and I'll just point this out at this stage, is that he has a theory of the capital expenditure on a particular good limiting the speed at which the cycle of fashion appears to be operating. So you spend more on building and on furniture than on the clothing. So the rate of fashion, the cycle of fashion is different for each one of these things, which is itself, I think, quite an interesting observation. Okay, so fashion is cyclical, and it's cyclical at different rates depending on the nature of the good itself, and it's led by this character called the man of fashion, who people see wearing a particular item of clothing or having a particular item of furniture, and they want to imitate that, they want to have that because they want to be in the position that he's in, i.e. the position of somebody who's approved all or looked at by other people. Now the next step in this story is, of course, what happens when something has been observed by others, and they say, well, the man of fashion has that, I must have that coat. And what happens, of course, is that that coat, or versions of that coat, are produced and come onto the market, and then acquired by more and more people. And the more people acquire this good, the less is its value as a status symbol or a distinction symbol for the man of fashion. Okay, so again, there's a temporal element. As the good is diffused, it loses its power as something that the man of fashion, the leader of fashion, ought to have. And this is one of the things, one of the ways Smith links this into his wider exploration of the gradual improvement in society and the trickling down of wealth is precisely through this analysis of fashion. I think the starkest example of it is actually the one which he has about the king's marriage bed ending up as the ornament of an alehouse in Dunfermline. So what was once fit for the Queen of Scotland is now stuck in the attic of an alehouse in Dunfermline. So it's obviously not no longer the cutting edge of fashion, but maybe in Dunfermline, I suppose. Okay, so this fits in with what he has to say in general about development of a market for a particular consumer good. So the man of fashion, by virtue of his social position, is able to set a trend that will then be affected through the marketplace, and people who wish to emulate him will be provided with that good. And as that happens, the good itself loses its value as a status symbol. The other way in which he discusses the importance of this, and the man of fashion figures into the analysis, is of course in the decline of feudalism, because in that story it's precisely the trinkets of frivolous utility that the feudal lords alienate their land in order to buy. It's fashion items, that's what they want. So the man of fashion again comes into this story, selling off the power base and the ownership of land estates in order to acquire goods. And Smith quite clearly calls this childish vanity. And it is childish vanity in his system. But it's trinkets, it's baubles, it's consumer goods that are looked upon not for their utility, but rather for their ability to be displayed so that other people will observe you and regard you as the person who has that kind of good and admire your situation. So it's the same psychological model as the man of passion. Okay, so this is, the kind of area in which we're operating here. It's this character, the man of passion, clearly has a very important role in a lot of the key points that Smith wants to make about his economic analysis. But as I said, my interest is starting off from what he has to say about it in the theory of moral sentiment. So I want to return to that chapter. Okay, so in TMS, Smith uses, in the chapter in TMS, Smith wants to analyse the effect of fashion and custom. So the two are linked together. Okay? So we know, bear in mind the whole story about the man of fashion and how he's able to lead to fashion and so on, while we're talking about this. What he then goes on to say is quite interesting. He wants to say that fashion is led by individuals, but that those individuals operate within a set of constraints. And one of the constraints that's placed upon it is custom. So he says, fashion is different from custom, or rather it is a particular species of it. Okay? So it's a particular species of custom. And if we jump back a moment to the Wealth of Nations, he repeats a similar idea, and he says that custom everywhere regulates fashion. So custom is a constraint on fashion. What does he mean by that? Well, the example that I use in the paper is that custom dictates trousers and fashion comes up with flared trousers. Okay? So the man of fashion has to wear trousers by custom, but then he can change and alter how he's innovating on this. The reason that the example is trousers, by the way, is because I'm in St Andrews and there's lots of golfers in St Andrews, and there's some spectacularly bizarre pairs of trousers. Yeah, so that was the point anyway. Not that the golfers are fashionable, but I'm sure within the world of golf there are people leading the fashion in true trousers. So the idea then is that there are certain social beliefs, habits that take the form of custom, and that custom places boundaries on what's going on in the world of fashion. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things that happens or occurs at this point, in the story as I want to tell, is that Smith actually comes out and admits, look, we all know that this is completely irrational. We know that fashion is irrational. We know that these people are not virtuous people we're following. We know that they're just very superficial. All their lives are all about appearances and wanting to be liked by other people. But nonetheless, we are influenced by it, even if we don't want to admit it. Okay, so it says, it's quite interesting. Few men, therefore, are willing to allow that custom or fashion have much influence upon their judgments concerning what is beautiful or otherwise in productions of any of those arts. But imagine that all the rules which they think ought to be observed in each of them are founded upon reason and nature, not on habit or prejudice. A very little attention, however, may convince them of the contrary, and satisfy them that the influence of custom and fashion over dress and furniture is not more absolute than over architecture, poetry and music. Actually, if we think about it, we're aware that this is an irrational process, but nonetheless one we're actually continually engaging in. Why are we continuing to engage in it? Well, we're continuing to engage in it because we don't want to be somebody who's looked upon by others as being out of step, not conforming. Why don't we want to be like that? Well, because we want, according to Smith, from our natural sociability to seek the approval of others. So even if we know it's irrational to wear flared trousers, if everyone else is wearing flared trousers, we'll wear flared trousers. Okay? The man of fashion, of course, by that point will be wearing drain-pipe trousers or something like that. Same thing going in a new direction. Okay, so custom regulates fashion, And there's a cyclical process going on. So I want to attach these two things together. So custom is regulating fashion, and there is a cyclical process dependent on the capital, well, potentially dependent on the capital expenditure of the goods involved. 1 year for clothes, 5 years for fashion and furniture, 100 years for buildings and art. And interestingly as well, he extends that and says that intellectual systems are also subject to fashion. So in a number of passages, he says that where he actually explicitly uses the phrase, the system that was in fashion at that time. And he says that there's a longer cycle again for intellectual systems, so we can stick intellectual systems onto, or perhaps beyond, the cyclical level of buildings. Okay, so the point, as I said at the beginning of this chapter, is to make a distinction between custom, fashion, and the moral sentiments. And the worry is that custom and fashion can have an influence on human behaviour such that it perverts it or leads it away from what Smith regards as the natural exercise of moral sentiments. So what presumably that means, if we want to put this into our table here, is that the moral sentiments, central part of moral sentiments, can be affected by this cyclical process of fashion and custom. So what we then get to see is morality being taken, if you like, to the extreme end of this timeline, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, that we have here. Something that can be, or is not subject to change, or even if it is subject to change, it's subject to change on such a long cycle that it can't be compared with fashion and custom. Now the worry, I think, here in this chapter is brought out by a number of examples, but the one that most often kind of is talked about and sticks in the mind is the one that appears at the end of the chapter, which is infanticide. And the worry there is that Smith has is that he has to explain how it is that societies he regards as civilized, ancient Greeks and Romans, engaged in an activity that he regards as offending against what he calls the plainest principles of right. Okay, so the way that he tries to do that is by using fashion and custom to explain how a particular activity what he calls a particular usage can be maintained in a society that's otherwise civilized. Okay, so the moral sentiments can be warped by fashion and custom in a particular manner, but only with respect to certain aspects of society. So what does he mean by that? What he means is that a society, a whole society, can't have a moral order that is entirely warped and out of sync with the natural sentiments of mankind, but it is possible for a society to exist with particular usages within it that are authorised by habit and custom, fashion, that go against what he regards as, or I suppose, to use his own terminology, what he calls the natural feelings. Okay, so with the example of infanticide, what that means is it's possible for a society to have a very particular set of beliefs about the appropriateness of infanticide in certain situations, but it would be impossible for a society to exist or to continue to exist which had that attitude written across the whole of the society. In other words, a society where children's food is being disposable across the board. That kind of society couldn't survive. Okay. So custom can warp morality. And this is where we get to this problem that I started with. The potential for Smith to be considered as a relativist, because the way he's described the generation of morality and the way the parallel discussion about fashion up to this point, we've not been given a particular external viewpoint that would allow us to criticise it. Now Smith has gone on talking as though there is an external viewpoint, but nothing in the story so far has told us what this external viewpoint actually is. Okay, so one way into understanding this is comparing what Hume says and what Smith says. So according to Hume, changes in moral belief over time are the result of a contagion through society. People just simply emulate the behaviour of other people. gradually these things build up into changes in beliefs about right and wrong. Now Smith wants to avoid that. I'm suggesting Smith wants to avoid that, but just thus far hasn't told us how he's going to avoid it. Okay. So for Hume, in principle, there's no difference between fashion and morality. They can be exactly the same phenomenon, explained in exactly the same way. Now, how Smith gets around this is what he sees as a problem, something he's worried about. One way he tries to get around it is by the description of the impartial spectator as part of his system of the description of conscience and moral behaviour. And what that allows Smith to do is to remove the unthinking or emulating element of, to a certain extent, what Hume's saying. Okay, so what you have then is somebody consulting their own opinions within their mind, consulting the man within, reflecting on what the right thing to do is, and us making some kind of judgment rather than simply copying somebody else. There's a thought process, there's a consultation going on. Okay. And Smith cashes this out in terms of the moral sentiments by making a distinction between praise and praiseworthiness. So in the Humean account, it's praise that's doing the work. We're seeking the praise of other people, we're adjusting our behaviour to get that praise. The whole thing is ramifying out across society, gradually changing the forms and customs and habits that hold in that society. Okay? So, with Smith, however, the desire for praiseworthiness is built into the system. So it's not just that they want other people to praise us, we want to be worthy of that praise. We want to know for ourselves that we've not tricked the other people, we're not being praised by simply for superficial appearances, that we're actually doing something that's deserving of praise, that we think is deserving of praise. What's this got to do with the story about fashion? Well, I think, and this is the bit where people have been saying that this is the place where we can try out ideas, so I'm going to try out an idea here. I think there's something to be learned about how Smith gets to this, precisely from what he says about fashion. Okay? And I've talked to you about the man of fashion, but now I want to talk to you about someone else, and that's someone called the coxcomb. The coxcomb is a character who also appears in a number of places in Smith's work. A coxcomb is someone who thinks he's a man of fashion, but everybody knows he's not. Okay? Now Smith paints very nice pictures of what the coxcomb's behaviour is like. And again, here he's drawing on Hume, because Hume has talked about people, Hume called them plagiaries. This is somebody who is praised without actually without deserving that praise. But the coxcomb's a particular type of that, because what the coxcomb does is genuinely believes that he is the person leading the fashion. Okay, so the coxcomb puts on the airs and graces and behaviour of a man of fashion. He, as much as he is able, buys the clothes for the man of fashion. He regards himself as being the person who is setting the scene. He thinks that everyone's looking at him and approving of him and sympathising with him in the way that they do with the man of fashion. But in reality they're not. They know that he's not the man of fashion. People can tell the difference between a coxcomb and the genuine man of fashion, according to Smith. So what is it? What is it that the coxcomb is lacking? Well, the coxcomb is lacking the same thing that the person who desires praise without praiseworthiness is lacking. He's lacking self-awareness. So the man of fashion knows he's the man of fashion. The coxcomb thinks he's the man of fashion. What I want to suggest is that you actually get another parallel discussion here. So we have a parallel model of how fashion is generated that parallels how shared moral sentiments are generated. And we have a worry in the moral sentiment story that leads him to talk about the impartial spectator, leads him to talk about the distinction between praise and praiseworthiness. And we have the identification in the theory of fashion of the man of fashion and the distinction between the man of fashion and the coxcomb. I think there is actually a very clear parallel here. That's just what I wanted to point out in relation to that. What does this mean, or what do we get from this? If I'm right about this parallel existing, what I think we get is an analysis of, or a way into understanding Smith's wider, longer-term theory of social change. Okay, there is no real description in Smith of changing moral beliefs through time. He notes that it happens, but he doesn't tell us how it happens. What I want to suggest is that if we look at what he says about fashion and then extend it temporally, we might get a story about social change. Okay. What does that mean? Well, we've got this here, right? I already explained that he thinks custom regulates fashion. If we stick on the end of that something else, Smith would call nature, the same kind of drawing on the natural jurisprudential tradition. We have a further regulative element to this. What we can then say, if we want to extend the model of what he says about fashion, is say that the cyclical change and the way that the cyclical change occurs in fashion can be extended over a temporal period and referred to custom, but be restricted and constrained by nature in the same way that fashion is restricted and constrained by custom. Why do I want to argue this? Well, the reason I want to argue this is because I think that what we would get from this is an understanding of him struggling with precisely this issue about relativism, but struggling with it from a temporal dimension rather than a spatial dimension, changing moral beliefs over time. And also, what I think this helps us do is see why he thinks that there is an external position, or there's potentially an external position, which would allow him to criticise particular customs, just as he could criticise particular fashions. And that's because, if I'm right, nature regulates custom, which regulates fashion. What would this tell us about social change beyond that? Well, what it would tell us, if we're right, if my description of what he says about fashion is right, is that the same thing would apply over longer term cycles about moral beliefs. We look at other people's behaviour using the moral psychology that he's given us with the impartial spectator and the distinction between praise and praiseworthiness and so on. We make assessments of other people's behaviour and then adjust our own behaviour accordingly through a process of moral learning. What this means is that the danger that he identifies about fashion, that it will corrupt and pervert the moral sentiments, might be true of people like the man of fashion, whose entire attention is focused upon the superficialities. But on the other hand, what that might mean is that might provide us with, if you like, a kind of morality tale. So people are naturally drawn, or their attention is naturally drawn to celebrities and famous people in society. The danger is that they begin to regard their behaviour as morally desirable and then to emulate it. What I think Smith is building in with the impartial spectator mechanism is the possibility of looking at celebrities, looking at the way they live their lives, and making, or from that, drawing lessons for your own life, in the sense that you can look at what they're doing, but at the same time make a judgment within yourself about whether or not you think that behaviour is appropriate. So actually, what all these superficial characters like the man of fashion and the celebrity do is they allow us something to observe, to look at, and to ponder, to improve our own moral sensibilities, our own moral education. Similarly, also, what they might do is provide us with someone who acts as a trailblazer for a particular activity. So in order for a form of behaviour, or in order for a moral belief or a customary belief to change over time, somebody has to break the initial taboo against it. And that person has to be seen to do that, and other people then have to reflect on what they've done, according to Smith, and choose to emulate them. So if we look at people who are in the public eye, people that we're actually observing, people that we see, and then make an assessment of what we think, or what we ourselves think about their behaviour, then perhaps that provides us with an explanation for how each step in this long-term cyclical process unfolds. So, that's it.
Project is very provocative, and there are a few things I'd like to raise and see how you would react to it. And I apologize because I would bring in Wealth of Nations more than TMS, and I know that you're focusing more on TMS than Wealth of Nations. But nevertheless, I think these examples would either, you should somehow deal with these two examples. One is the way in which the opera dancers are looked at. And Smith criticized, or Smith says that in his time, opera dancers are seen as basically prostitutes, right? So they are looked at as immoral, as an immoral profession.
Yeah.
But he also says, well, if something changes, then they will not be immoral anymore, and mostly is an income problem. So in that case, you have, on a temporal level, the very strong possibility that morality changes the judgment on the opera dancers. So it is not cross place, but cross time. Just a question of time, and before you know it, opera dancer will be just another profession. The other thing that it brings out in Wealth of Nations is the two systems of morality for austeres and poor. I'm sorry, for the rich and poor.
Yes.
The austere system for the poor and the licentious system for the rich. Yeah. And that, again, like you have two moral systems that are very different. And I'm curious to see how you would address those two situations.
Yeah, I do touch on, just in a footnote on that last point about the difference between the moral code for the rich and the poor. What in the footnote in the paper where I refer to or discuss it in terms of is the fact that Smith's very clear that we let the rich away with an awful lot more than we let the poor away with. We're willing to indulge the man of fashion, when we might not be willing to indulge the poor man. So there's that element certainly present in it. And attached to that, of course, is the fact that if a poor person tried to live the life of a man of fashion, it would be disastrous for them, potentially, because they would expend what little capital they had very, very quickly, and would just simply be regarded as being reduced to very severe levels of digits. So, yeah, that's certainly right. But what I think well, the way I think he seeks to answer that is that it's part of the story about the generation of fashion and custom is the constraints placed upon both of those phenomena by the circumstances in which people find themselves. So the fashion, all societies have fashion, all societies have custom. Some circumstances, some societies find themselves that mean that the way those things are expressed are very, very different. And I think the way that he would explain the distinction of the rich and poor would be that the circumstances experienced by the rich and the circumstances experienced by the poor shape these things in a different way within the same society. So that's probably the way that I would try and give an account of that. On the first point, though, I think you're right on the first point about that, yeah. The change can happen. Some of these changes could potentially happen a lot quicker than others. Yeah.
If you justify the situation as differences in circumstances, then what you're saying is that different circumstances generate different moral systems. Because Smith is explicit in saying the wealthy have a different moral system from the poor. It's not just passion.
Yeah.
He's talking about it. He's saying that the systems are different. So what you're saying is circumstances generate different moral systems.
Yes.
So we have competing moral systems.
There can be competing, yeah. What I want to get to is a point of understanding how he thinks that's the case, but that nonetheless there is a position from which he can criticise both the rich and the poor. So the mystery is, what's this position? How does he get that? Because according to the way his theory is set up, he can give an account of how the poor generate their moral code, how the rich generate their moral code, how different cultures generate their moral codes. But he can't give himself a situation within that to make the kinds of judgments he wants to make about the others. So that's the mystery.
This is just a point of clarification for you with respect to your slide. You mentioned that Smith related capital expenditures to the clothing, furniture, and buildings, but did it also apply to the intellectual systems and morals as well?
Well, quite interesting. I mean, he doesn't explicitly say the capital expenditures. I think that's clearly what the framework is, but he doesn't come out and say that. When he talks about intellectual systems, I think you're right in the sense that the story that, as you get it in history of astronomy, is that people explore the possibilities within a system. And I'm not going to talk about this in any more detail than strictly necessary, but or Maria can just correct me. But the idea is that people explore intellectual systems until they prove to be unproductive for explaining things. So if it's an investment of time, intellectual effort and time, then yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering how your timeline that you put up there, does that in any way relate to David Hume's test of time? Or I don't know much about it, but I looked at that and thought, and was wondering if there's any relation.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't considered that. So the idea is that antiquity begets the opinion of right. So the longer something has been in place, the more likely we are to regard it as being right, if that's the case, or that it has a value. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. You might be right about that. So how would that? Well, that would then mean that we would be more likely to value beautiful furniture than beautiful clothes. Beautiful buildings than beautiful furniture, beautiful clothes, and beautiful ideas than beautiful buildings, I suppose. So yeah, I suppose you could twist that a bit, but I hadn't thought about it in those terms.
But I guess the follow-up question is who decides what's beautiful, and how, right?
Who decides what's beautiful? The answer to that in terms of clothing for Smith is the man of fashion.
Okay.
In terms of intellectual system, it's the intellectuals who discuss these ideas. It's the parallel is the parallel to Hume that I had in mind here, rather than the one you suggested, is to the essay on the standard of taste, where he talks about how it is that you determine what is beautiful in art, and what it is to do that. And what you do basically is you have a group of critics who know that field of art and who are experienced in it, and they discuss together and come up with an assessment of what counts for most beautiful.
In the same years, at the end of the 18th century, in the continent, the fashion was strictly related to the debate of luxury expenditure. I would like to know if something there, because it was about productive and productive commodities. And there is another very marginal question. Sometimes Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, he distinguished between men and women while dealing with schools. Maybe somewhere, I don't know, but I'm sure while dealing about school. Here are there, you used always the word person and man. Was it Smith doesn't mention, and because woman is a person.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Or for some other reason.
No, you're right, there is a distinction. There is a passage, I can't remember the reference exactly, the one where he's very dismissive of women. He thinks that they are more addicted to fashion than men are. So there is a distinction there that he's going to draw.
I was thinking precisely when you spoke about the coxcomb.
The coxcomb, yeah.
Yes, related to the intellectual system.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of the role of meetings, tea parties in Europe.
Oh, yes.
Intellectuals
Yes.
were very effective.
Yes.
They were very important. And were managed by ladies.
Yes, yeah. No, that's right. It is sort of a double-edged sword for Smith, because one of the things that he likes about that kind of situation is that improves upon the delicacy of the behaviour of those at that kind of that kind of event. When he went to the pub with Hume and Ferguson in Edinburgh, it was a very raucous kind of occasion, but these salon type meetings that they had, there was a very different set of manners or different set of manners at play there. But no, I hadn't connected that to fashion, but that certainly is something that he talks about in terms of fashion, because that is where the man of fashion figures at something like that. That's where they're looked at and observed by other people. That's where they show off the gracefulness of their manners, the elegance of their conversation. So the man of fashion is superficial, but he's not necessarily unintelligent, is the point. I mean, he has the correct manners and the ability to display himself as having taste. So he's not a stupid person.
Yes.
Yeah. The coxcomb, on the other hand, is a stupid person.
Yes, he's a stupid man,
Yeah.
but he asks for commodities. He's able to activate market.
Yeah.
Oh, he can, yes. The coxcomb can be very wealthy, and often when he does talk about that kind of person, it is somebody who is kind of nouveau riche. It's somebody who's got all the money and thinks that they are, or have access to this world of fashion, but they don't. And I think Smith does depict that in a very accurate, I suppose slightly cruel way, but it is accurate. On the luxury thing, no, I agree. This whole thing is the discussion of fashion fits into that kind of concern, 18th century concern, perfectly, and it is precisely the worry about the effect on the morals of individuals that the phenomenon of fashion potentially has.
Thank you.
That's there.
Thank you.
There's a distinction that has been puzzling me a little bit between fashion in closed furniture buildings and as opposed to intellectual systems and morals.
Yeah.
I can see how it goes from fashion, for example, the poor want to imitate the rich. But what if that is the case? You started to mention it, but you didn't develop it. Once that is actually the case, then the man of fashion is in trouble, right? Because now he's not the man of fashion,
Yeah.
even if everybody else has it. So if you want to parallel to the approbation system, it's true that you're searching the approbation of others through fashion, but only in one way. The man of fashion searches the approbation of others, but once he also searches to differentiate himself from others,
Yes.
which is not exactly the same way in which a virtuous man would behave. Because a virtuous man would like to see everybody as virtuous as he is, if not more. The man of fashion doesn't want that. Similarly, for an intellectual system, you would like everybody to adopt it.
Yeah.
And once they adopt it, you're happy. You don't want to differentiate yourself from that system again, unless you have reasons to do it. But for morality in particular, there's a larger universality, if you wish,
Yeah.
of the approbation than in fashion. where the point of, especially the division of ranks, is to differentiate yourself from the others.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. The bit that I'm trying to get to is to say that what's at stake isn't, or what's interesting for this, the end bit. I hadn't thought of it in terms of intellectual systems, but I think you're right, and you say that. Certainly for the end bit that models is not the process of the emulation and the desire to be different. What I think you can do is you can use that as a model for how social change comes about. I don't think it can give you an explanation of how the first steps towards a change in socially accepted beliefs. Okay, and it goes through the same I'm suggesting it parallels the emulation process. But in terms of intellectual systems, you're right. What you want to do is you want to persuade people that you're correct and you want them to follow you. And he does note that in TMS. He says that, but he uses it in reference to writing, music, and architecture. Says that somebody who's particularly gifted or eminent in one of these is able to set the fashion, set the trend for potentially for a very long series of time, period of time when people kind of work out the differences and that kind of thing. So there appears to be a difference between the trendsetter in that respect and the man of fashion in the other. So yeah, perhaps you're right. Perhaps what is closer. Perhaps when we get onto intellectual systems and things like that, we're actually coming closer to the how the thing would work in relation to morals rather than in relation to the man of fashion. That's helpful.
This is terrific. It's a very interesting and important paper. You work with the distinction between something like absolutism and relativism. And what if we work in Stoic terms, where the distinction is going to be between necessary natural and indifferent? And as I understand it, necessary natural means it's always observed, and indifferent means it's sometimes observed. And so suddenly as a thing indifferent comes down to the Stoics, because some people disapprove, some people approve, some people say whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then the question is, which the Stoics were going to ask, if something is necessary, is it necessarily necessary? If something is possible, is it necessarily possible? And the current thinking seems to be that it's necessary, it's necessarily necessary, but if it's possible, it's not necessarily possible. So that's the distinction between S4 and S1. And that this is attractive. I'm thinking about this seriously because there's on the paper. This is attractive because the question of what do we do with infanticide, which is precisely right. And Smith is really hard on Plato and Aristotle, not because of for proper reasons, but for the infanticide.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, who's on the other side of that debate? And the answer, of course, is the Stoics. Famously, one of the Stoic saints got married to save a child from exposure. And so the Stoics are pushing that exposure is good. And it's a natural signal. And so that merely because it's commonly observed, it's regarded as something different, doesn't mean that that's not irrevocable. And so if you sort of think about, the Stoic tradition, then, infanticide is there. It's a whitewash to think that it wasn't approved of by the philosophers of greatest moral standard, but there's this funny group who are not positioned in this.
Yeah.
And it's that funny Irving Smith thinks the world. I think it's, as you know, I'm sure that no one's anything, how the debates have raged over whether Smith's position on that. I think you're sort of, the way you're setting the problem up may be a way in to say, well, where does that fit in Smith's? What is Smith's attitude toward infanticide tell us about the larger project? We observed it. But is it irrevocable? Is it always going to be the way that attitudes toward sodomy or liberal sex, this sort of the difference in sexual attitudes are forever. And that's the sort of text Maria was citing. I was saying actually not discovered. So those differences are there forever. But the attitude toward infanticide is not there forever. And so that might be. So that might be a way in to think of some of these.
That's interesting. I mean, certainly one of the things related to what you were saying that occurred to me in this is that one way you can read this potentially is as a providential timeline. Right? So you can read this as being a cyclical analysis, but another way you might want to read this is as a progressive providential advancement. And I'm wary of that. But I'm aware that certainly there are elements of Stoic thought that wanted to accept that. So if we want to read Smith as influenced by them, then this could take on a kind of, almost a kind of naive progressivism. But I want to step back on that and say that, what he's dealing with, what he's trying to explain and account for, is the fact that there have been changes in belief over time. And that he has a model for the explanation of the generation of belief, and he wants to try and understand the implications of that for these very serious changes in beliefs about infanticide. And it's interesting that you should put it in terms of the Stoics as being an identified group attacking or criticizing a particular practice, because presumably before they engaged in the attack and criticism of that, obviously there's probably no evidence for this, they ceased the practice themselves. So the practice was widespread in their society, they ceased the practice for a reason, or they had a reason for ceasing the practice. And then the model, if I'm right, the model that Smith's trying to sell here would be that gradually the Stoics would win the argument.
Any other questions? Comments? I'm sorry, I forgot. It's the first time I forgot what the heck.
Sorry, I was, just had another thought about that, the top row again. Could you think of the leftmost column as being private goods, then as you move towards center, you have club goods, and then public goods at the right?
Oh yeah, I don't want to go there.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Sorry, it's a different thing.
You can't read
George.
No, I don't want to go there.
Someone else will, though.
It's Steph's right, baby.
Thanks very much.